All right, guys, welcome to the Grow Podcast. I am Ashley, and this is my partner, Wendy.
Hey, Ashley.
How are you doing today?
I am doing well. We're recording here on a Sunday morning, and I always say we are not a morning people about my family. But somehow I'm up and awake and ready to roll.
Right? Yeah. No, you know what? And I'm excited to talk about it. So we're coming into Women's History Month. It's the first of the month, and I feel like it's right that we talk about women and see how it connects us to our spirituality and just talk about some of the things that we feel are important to us, just as two different types of women, and go from there. What are your initial thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'm excited to chat with you about Women's History Month because it's true. We're friends, but we come from completely different backgrounds. And, so our take about how women are treated perhaps might be different. And I think there's still so much more work to do. I think we've come a long way as women in some ways here in the US. Things have sort of been rolled back recently, some of our rights as citizens. But when we look at the whole history from a larger perspective, we definitely have made progress as women.
Yeah.
We were talking before the show as we were preparing, and just the idea that it wasn't until 1974 that women could have their own bank account, their own line of credit, their own mortgage. It blows my mind, because I was 10 and, coming up, as a female, right? And I had no idea that I wouldn't have those rights and privileges. What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah. So I heard this some time ago, and I think the context is important, especially when we talk about history. And I talk to my kids about this all the time, is that there's a lot that has evolved that we're not that far removed from, and we take it for granted. And I think the idea of a woman having a bank account, or even the idea of a woman being an entrepreneur, is not like something that my parents could do, you couldn't do, less than a lifetime ago. And I just think it's mind-boggling, to be honest with you. I think, and the other thing is, living in our society today, we throw out terms like the patriarchy and capitalism, and we do gripe a lot about it, and I think rightfully so. But I think that we use it so often that it becomes watered down. But like this one fact alone, to me, just puts a lot of context into why it's so important to have some of those conversations, because the patriarchy is the reason why women didn't have the right to do a lot of things like vote and to have a bank account and to be self-sustaining. And,
Right.
it kind of lends into some of the conversations about the nuclear household, and why it was important to have the traditional family structure, because if you couldn't have your own bank account, you needed a man to do that. And how many men do you know that were going to help you do that?
Yeah, that's such a provocative thought. Like that you actually needed a man to do those things. It makes you, and I believe we're all sovereign beings. However, that sets you up to be dependent on someone else. Mm-hmm. And I know the women in my family, my grandma Rose was a very independent, strong woman who divorced when my mother was a baby, divorced her husband, and that was really unheard of at that time. And when I think about it now, as we talk about this fact,
yeah, there's
I don't know how she did it. I don't know how she did it. It makes her feel even stronger to me. I've always, I thought she was kind of an oddball when I was a kid, didn't fully understand her as she, sat back with her highball and her cigarette at family parties, right? She wasn't like your typical grandma. Yeah. And she taught me at a young age, she told me straight up, because I was a dancer when I was young and a creative, and that's what I really wanted to do. But she said, Wendy, you're short, you'll have trouble getting jobs, it'll be a difficult life. go to college, do something you can always know that you have a career and never ever depend on a man.
Mhm.
And so I'm grateful that she said that to me at the time. It felt really harsh, but I never forgot it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, so I really look up to the women in my family. There's a lot of really strong women, and I'm grateful that I had them, and not realizing as a child how important that was.
Yeah.
So that was kind of my experience, and not knowing that there's this backdrop of that their hands were tied in so many ways. Um, you know, we could talk about some of the other issues as well, but I'm curious about what your experience was as a young child with the women around you.
In general, because so my identity is more wrapped up in my race than it is in my womanhood, if that makes sense. And so, in general, Black women do tend to have a strength to them that I saw all around me and everywhere, because there was always something that needed to be almost fought for, whether it was attention, whether it was resources, whether it was, just access to something. It just always seemed like it needed to be a battle. But I did recognize that there was a clear difference between the male experience versus the female experience, because Black males have like a right to the aggression or
Mm,
the strength, whereas you needed to have the strength, but at the same time you still needed to show up feminine and in many ways over sexualized.
right, very interesting. Well, there are some really famous women from Maryland,
Yeah.
and let's see, I'm trying to remember now. Harriet Tubman is one of them, right?
Yes. We were talking earlier, I think because I'm on the East Coast, so there was a lot of colonial experiences, history that lives on this side, from like the Liberty Bell to the Underground Railroad, certain areas of the Civil War. I have really a lot of access to those things. And Harriet Tubman is one. She had the Underground Railroad, and she actually came from Maryland, and we have museums here and such. And so, just having even those people in our history that show up and did those amazing things, I think also motivates me in a lot of
Yes.
ways.
Uh-huh.
Like, 'cause if you could live during that time and do such an amazing job, like, golly, yeah, I can teach people about cannabis medicine and
That's
motivate them.
right.
Like, golly,
That's right. Thank goodness for those role models. I
right?
totally agree. And we'll be right back. Hey there, Wendy Jo from the Grow podcast. We're celebrating Women's History Month, and while it's my honor to celebrate women every single day, I think it's great to have a month where we look back at all of the amazing women in history who have made contributions to our society and who have worked really hard to make sure that women have equality with other human beings and have agency over our own bodies and sovereignty to live the lives that we choose to live. Unfortunately, some things have rolled back and women are suffering once again, so the fight is not over until we fulfill spiritually what we are meant to be, which is sovereign beings with agency and control over our own bodies and our own lives. Happy Women's History Month.
Have you ever thought about consuming cannabis but was worried about smoking it or eating it? Or maybe you just want to give your lungs a break, or you had a really bad edible experience. As a healthcare professional, I am very conscious of the multiple ways of dosing your medicine. One of the ways that you can consume cannabis is through a transdermal patch. This is not often talked about. The cool thing about transdermal is that there is a 97% bioavailability to this type of consumption method. Now, the problem is finding a trusted resource to facilitate your consumption. And guess what? I found a product that I support. It's called Synergy Skinworks. It's a cannabis delivery system that works effortlessly since the medicine goes where the blood flows. Patch on, peace out.
And we're back. It's Women's History Month, and we're chatting about it today here on the Grow podcast. So you briefly mentioned voting rights. We were talking about different rights that women have that are not that old, really, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was like 1920 when white women really got the right to vote, and I don't think people realized there was a difference, right? It was later that really women of color and other backgrounds also got full voting rights in the U.S. And that was like 1965 or something, but it was still a challenge in the South and in areas where they really did not want people other than white people voting.
Yeah, for sure. And I just think it's so interesting that even that was a right that we had to fight for, to have an opinion about who should be running this country. And it goes back to recognizing that we do live in a patriarchal system, and that's the way it was designed originally. And meaning that we prioritize men, its opinions, thoughts, rights over women. And over the years, over the past, I guess, century, we've kind of piecemealed some laws together and said, hey, let's include these people. But, because it wasn't designed to include you or I, I think that that's something that just needs to be recognized as we move through this system, because it impacts the way that we're perceived, and it impacts how far we can go and how far reaching our voices can go, because I think we're always just going to get the bare minimum.
Yeah, so when I think about this, and earlier we were talking about rights to own property and credit and all bank accounts, right? How would that feel to not have a say in who's going to govern over you, and to not be able to sustain yourself really the way that the other half of the population can? It just really blows my mind, and I can't imagine. It feels so oppressive even thinking about it, and you're right, the patriarchy, in recent years we've heard a lot of talk about that, about the patriarchy, smash the patriarchy, blow it apart. I remember when our last president, I'm not going to say his name, DT, was coming into office, and there was so much talk and opposition, and the whole grab him by the pussy situation and all of that. And my friend Arlene, who is in her 70s, she had a different perspective. She wasn't getting upset. She was like, I'm watching the patriarchy start to be dismantled in front of us, and, so that was her perspective, looking back, right? She's seeing people are actually talking about it openly and arguing about that. And she saw it as a good thing,
I agree with that thought. I think that anything that goes unspoken will continue to fester, and to
Good
be able
point.
to have those conversations out loud, I think is like super important. I mean, even you and I just being able to have conversations like this on a podcast where people can hear different points of view, not to say that I'm 100% right or you're 100% right, but it's about like just offering perspective around some of these topics. So that way, that can be considered and empathized when, you engage with other people who may have similar points of view or maybe not. And that,
Right.
I think,
Right.
is what is the catalyst for disrupting certain systems.
Agreed. And, since then, of course, we had Roe versus Wade overturned, and women's rights as sovereign beings once again being challenged. And boy, is it being challenged. I keep reading every day more state legislatures trying to pass laws that limit what women can do with their body. Most recently in Missouri, just last week, to limit a woman's ability to travel to get an abortion in a state where that she could access that kind of health care. And, so we're talking about limiting a woman's ability to travel in the United States of America.
Yeah. Oh.
In 2024. Like,
Yeah.
what?
Yeah. All over her right to choose how she wants to govern her body.
Yes.
And it's so upsetting to know that somebody outside of you, a system, it's not even a person, it's a system that's trying to tell us how we decide what goes on with our body. I just think is just absolutely mind blowing.
I keep like thinking I'm in an altered reality because we fought this fight. My mother fought this fight, years ago, right? And many women that I know were in that fight and are still in it now, actually. We see a lot of elders out there fighting because they already fought for it. It's just mind boggling. And the idea that women are continuing to vote in the primaries for this person who boasts about overturning Roe versus Wade, being a catalyst for that. It just blows my mind because, let's face it. Okay, so you can be a woman who does not believe that anyone should have an abortion, and that's fine for yourself. You believe that you're not ever going to do it. Cool. But how do you think that you have the right to tell another woman what to do? There is not any reason in my mind that a woman could tell me why she's having an abortion that I should have an opinion about. That's her business. So I want to say from Arkansas, Helen Gurley Brown is from Arkansas, and she wrote the book Sex and the Single Girl, which is in the early 60s, which was, really kind of a groundbreaking thing to write about at that time. And then she became the editor of Cosmopolitan magazine. And as I was kind of looking up, famous women that, we see a lot in entertainment and, but many who end up in some kind of publishing. And I think that's really important and wise because when you get into media and publishing, now you have a voice. So I just wanted to mention her, and there are some others like that as well.
Yeah, she's a big deal. And, the other person that just came to mind just now, Mary Tyler Moore. Did you watch her show?
I watched her show. So when I grew up in the 70s, really, and early 80s, but I looked up to Mary Tyler Moore. I mean, I remember watching that with her tossing her hat in the air, being on her own, her own apartment, her own job, and all the struggles that she went through as a woman too. But I really looked up to her, and I'm so grateful. It was that, and That Girl was another one that was really popular. I don't know if you're familiar with that, with Martin Thomas. Mm-hmm. So she was a single woman living in New York City, trying to make it as an actress. Mm-hmm. And I learned later that she agreed to do this show as long as they did not have her get married on the show. And which was really groundbreaking, right? Because here she is in New York. She had a boyfriend. And I remember thinking, like, they never got married. They became engaged at some point, but never got married. And I didn't know that was the reason. She said, I'll do the show. You just can't marry me off because I'm going to be an independent woman, I don't know. Where is Mary Tyler Moore from, though? Do you know? I
don't know where she's from. You know what? I don't know a ton of history, but I know that very similar to what you just described, she made a very pointed effort to make sure that women showed up as strong and had her own opinions. Even though she went through the struggles, she always came out on top at the end. And I think that was very important to see that, even for me as a young person, just seeing a woman do her thing. Because again, what was shown to me, or like the examples that was given was, you have to have a nuclear family, you have to have a mom, and I'm talking like I don't have a nuclear family, but it was a choice as opposed to pushed onto me. And going back to the where we started, the young woman who did Sex and the Single Girl back in the 60s, I feel like is the person who possibly paved the way for some of these other, these shows and media to even come forward,
Right.
and so.
Right. And I think so spiritually, just to bring it around a little bit, um, you know, our souls, in order to kind of feel that, compassion and understanding and sensitivity, we do need to see that representation, and also for ourselves, but also of other groups, and it kind of like brings us together, in a way. I think that's one aspect. I don't know, what are your thoughts to bring it around to sort of a spiritual idea for women?
Yeah, I think that in order to grow spiritually, we have to, like, you can't live within yourself to grow spiritually. You know what I'm saying? Like, internally, you become your own echo chamber, and
Mm,
there is this stagnancy. So part of the reason why we're communal creatures, like naturally, is because in order for me to realize that my skin is brown, in order for me to realize that my hair is short, right? In order for me to see that is through comparison to you. You see what I'm saying? Like, because otherwise I wouldn't even think about it. I wouldn't even consider it. It wouldn't matter. It wouldn't make a difference
right.
because, there's nothing to compare it to. And so to have like these media representations, to meet different types of people, you learn more about yourself and you realize like, oh, okay, like this is interesting, this is different, let me study this, let me explore that, let me, whatever it is that comes of it, and whatever the conclusions are, that's part of your divine evolution, right?
Right.
Like,
Yeah,
so.
I can see that. Let's chat more about that when we come back.
It is Women's History Month, and I want to talk about it. First, let's celebrate the uniqueness of every single woman. That includes all of our points of view on any given topic. And this month is a month to celebrate the sovereignty of all of us. And if you're not a woman, it's okay. Find a woman that you can celebrate. At the end of the day, we've come so far in many of our laws and rights, but it's okay to acknowledge that we have a long way to go too. So I'm curious, how are you celebrating Women's History Month?
Hey there, Wendy Love Edge here. I'm so excited because I have Edge Coaching and Consulting LLC, where I've brought together all of my education and experiences so that I can help you have the life that you want. I'm an intuitive life coach, Osho Zen card reader. I perform brain spotting services to help heal trauma, inner child work, Reiki, and so much more. So if you're interested, check it out, edgecoachingandconsulting.com, and you can book your services right on the website.
Have you heard of the Cannabis Nursing School? It's a place where cannabis nursing, entrepreneurship, and spirituality meet. The Highline Tribe is waiting for you, and it's so easy to find. CannabisNursingSchool.com.
And we're back. It's Women's History Month, and we're chatting about it here on the Grow Podcast. So we talked about all different issues surrounding women, and I think, spiritually, another big connection is the idea of sovereignty. Am I all on my own, a whole person,
Yeah.
able to make my own decisions, make decisions about my body, about where I want to live, about what I can buy, all these things. I think it's still a work in progress here in the US. I don't feel like women are treated as sovereign beings. I mean, let's face it, they still didn't pass equal pay for women in
Yeah.
in 2024. It's crazy to me. So, that the idea of sovereignty is still sort of an idea. We can operate as sovereign beings to the best of our ability, but it does make it difficult spiritually to feel, solid and grounded all on your own. I don't know. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think there's a faux sense of sovereignty, and especially in the U.S. I can't really speak for other areas of the world, but because we always have to operate within some sort of constructual system that we didn't really choose, and I think for that reason, I think there is still a lot of work to do, because really you get choices, you don't really get a choice. I don't like you get red or blue pill and you can choose the red or blue pill. There is no like even though there may be a green pill,
Hmm.
that's not going to be offered to you as long as it doesn't support the system. Does that make sense?
Mm,
And
right, right.
yeah, and and there has been a lot of work to do to remove a lot of the access choices out, so therefore, even though we feel like we're sovereign beings and we can make a choice, similar to the law around abortions, really it's not that much of a choice for us. We don't get the full range of
Mhm.
independence that I believe that the universe, God, whoever designed us to be able to have.
Right.
But I will say this too, because I don't want to be irresponsible. I think there is I think it is necessary to limit choices in certain circumstances. So the example that I usually give when I talk about things like this is you have to have a stop sign to tell people to stop, because then it'll be complete chaos. So, I don't know if we found like the balance in what it looks like to really govern a population of people.
Yeah, I understand. I mean, we need to have some basic laws that protect us all. Absolutely, I'm in agreement. I guess if we're going to limit what women can do with their bodies, we should look at men as well. If there is to be true equality, what will keep us all safe? Why are laws different for one versus the other? And I think that you know, we all as human beings have the right to make our own decisions. It's just really important to have that agency. And when rights start slipping away, we have to ask ourselves, is that for the good of society? Is it necessary? Is it just, all of those things. So I think as a spiritual being, what we can do is our best to live into our own empowered selves, be ourselves, and fight for the things that are necessary and important so that everyone can have their freedoms.
Yeah, yeah. Just being able to identify what's right. I think because a lot of us put blinders on to the things that aren't right. So even to know, like, hey, I recognize that this is not okay. This does not align with my being. Taking the time to recognize your spiritual self, your energetic self, and when you're knocked out of alignment, like I think those are all things that we do have autonomy over, and nobody can control that aspect of us as much as they try.
Absolutely. Well, this has been great, and I hope everyone has a great Women's History Month. This has been the Grow Podcast. I'm Wendy Jo.
And this is Ashley.
Have a great week, everyone. Bye.
Bye.